I've been seeing Dr. Frank for the past month for my own sinus issues. His treatment is very unique and it's unlike anything I've ever experienced or seen, which is we'll talk about in the show. But also spending that time with Dr. Frank, got to know and appreciate him as a human and how much information he has in the way he delivers that information and just the charismaticness of his personality. And so I'm really excited to sit and talk with him about his journey to find the practices that he's developed and to think about and talk to him about the plans for what he's doing next with all this cool information that he has. So hope you get something out of the show. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Dr. Frank Aversano, the Sinus Ninja. Anamkara is a gorgeous meditation and healing center, offering daily in-person and virtual services to help bring you back to the center of who you truly are. They serve through a collective of practitioners, healers, and teachers, offering daily meditation classes, one-on-one healing sessions, workshops, personal ceremonies, and private events, plus corporate and team training, all with mindfulness at the core. The center itself is located in the heart of downtown Spokane. Every part of it was built, designed, and curated for you to drop into your calm place. They have a large community space for daily meditation classes and workshops, as well as 2 one-on-one healing rooms, a community kitchen to gather for tea, plus a well-stocked apothecary for you to gather all of your self-care and ritual needs. Hannah Talbot, the owner and founder of Anamkara, dreamed of opening this space for years. It is her ultimate manifestation, and she cannot wait to share it with those in the Spokane community, but also through the virtual ethers, wherever you may be. Pop in for a class today. You can follow them on Instagram to book and stay up to date. Check out the website, the full schedule, meet the practitioners, and view all the offerings. Visit them at anamkarahealing.center. Anamkara, may you be nourished and ignited. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. Where we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. AdamRealHealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm sitting across from a beautiful human being that I met on my journey to figure out why my nose would not come unclogged and why my sinuses were just destroying me. So I went from having no allergies seemingly growing up at all. Like I had nothing going on. And I grew up in Texas, so outside of Washington State, but I've been up in Washington for 20 years. And even within those 20 years, no issues. Until 2 years ago, I got just bitch slapped with seasonal allergies that lasted 2 years.
Right.
And it drove me insane.
Right,
and I had I was so confused because like I understand allergies change, like things change every 7 years, is like the rule that they put out there. But it just out of nowhere, and it seemed like everything was annoying me. From pet dander to grass pollen to everything. And so then I started taking, multitude of antihistamines and did the nose sprays, and it got like minor relief, but it would give me maybe a couple hours, and then I'd have to go back to it. And then a couple hours, I'd go back to it. I was using that nose spray like 5 times a day,
You're not the only one. You're not alone.
I know, and that's such the interesting thing when I met you. So I was lamenting for years about this, and then one day my dear friend Colleen saw me after class one day and was like, I don't know why I haven't said this before, but there's a guy named Dr. Frank. He's the Sinus Ninja. And I'm like, okay, Colleen, we've known each other for almost 10 years now. And you're just now telling me you know a person called the Sinus Ninja? Like, that's like top priority information. Like, just that name alone, you should have just told me, hey, I met a guy named the Sinus Ninja. A nonchalant conversation should have been that.
Oh, I'm the best kept secret. Oh, yeah. Not for long after this podcast.
Not at all. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't even, you've got me sold by the name, but I did some research. I looked on your website and just found this amazing technique that you've kind of like figured out. And so so I went to Dr. Frank, the Sinus Ninja, and did a month-long treatment with him once a week for a month. And I feel fantastic. And so I was completely compelled to put this gentleman on my podcast and just talk with him, because not only is like what he's doing very unique and amazing, but the personality that this guy has is phenomenal. I love talking to you. I loved seeing you. The beard, the ninja moniker, like you're just a great human being. And I'm so happy to share this space with you.
Well, ditto, ditto. It takes one to know one. And if you haven't ever met Adam in person, he's got these beautiful, gorgeous locks coming out, this kind of Viking-like. And what he's referring to here is I have this big white beard that's not on my website picture.
No, it's not.
However, I've always had a beard. I think since I was born, I had a beard. Right? I'm Italian and Irish, and so I have the Celtic and this kind of Latin thing happening. So, yeah.
Oh, well, man, I've enjoyed our time together, and I think after our first session, I was like, I don't even care if this. It felt great after the first session, and I still had 3 more, and I'm like, I don't even care if this works, quote unquote. I gotta talk to you.
Perfect.
But what I do have to say is, after the 4 weeks, I feel so good. And so a lot of the information, a lot of the technique that you did was amazing.
Thank you.
But the information that you shared was, I think, one of the most pivotal parts of my mental treatment.
Yeah. What was the most impressive thing?
So the nasal spray was the biggest kind of adversary that I didn't know about.
Yeah, right.
And so using Mucinex and Afrin and all these different types of products. So
right.
How does that keep going unnoticed?
Yeah, it's because in our culture we have trust in the pharmacist behind the counter, and if there's anything in the pharmacy that can be used, it must be safe and it must be effective. And it is effective. Right? You probably discovered that it reduces your nasal congestion, but it's also addictive.
Yeah. And that's the part that I didn't realize was, and it's funny because I've heard now, after we had our conversation and I sat, because I meditate a lot. So I meditate and I think about shit.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing, at the same time that nasal spray was addictive, I remember hearing that chapstick was addictive. Oh. And it was just one of those nonsensical things
yes.
Oh, got it. Okay. We just get addicted to using it because
yes.
I like moist lips or whatever it is. I didn't realize that my nose was causing inflammation just so it could get more of that drug back into it without even me realizing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was kind of, it was kind of funny to me. Because I have a very addictive personality in general. That's why I don't drink. And so I'm like, of course my nose is addictive to shit,
Yeah, no, yeah. I can see that part of your personality, when something is good, let's do more of that. That's good. And variety of things also. Yeah. And if I could just say, the nasal sprays, I have people come in all the time to my office. I'm a naturopathic physician, and a naturopath in the state of Washington, by the way, is a primary care doctor. So we're trained, similarly to MDs and DOs, medical doctors and osteopaths in other states, like in Texas, for example. We have no licensure there for naturopaths. And so naturopaths can actually just go to school for a year and call themselves what's called an integrative medical doctor. And so a year of training, I went to school for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? So I went to school for undergraduate for 4 years, including pre-medical education. We had to take physics and chemistry and organic chemistry and calculus and all the things that the medical world expects a doctor to be have before they go to medical school. And so in addition, though, to get to Bastyr University, the Harvard of Natural Medicine, right, the Harvard of Natural Medicine, I had to also then do botany, and I had to understand plants and nature. In addition to the small chemistry, also the large, kind of elements, the plant, kind of constituents. And so I had to study that a little bit before I got to Bastyr. And when I got there, it was all about plant medicine, understanding, that. So, so as far as the medical world goes, it's, we have a lot of trust. And, the nasal sprays is one of those things where I have people coming in all the time to my specialty practice, my sinus practice, where I do a Medi-Spa treatment, which we'll discuss, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
And this Medi-Spa treatment helps people wean off of this addiction to nasal sprays. And so I'm very, very happy that I'm able to help people with that.
Very helpful. And I got to say, too, you're now the second person that I consciously know, that has a dual degree from UW and Bastyr. My other friend, Chris, who's actually been on the podcast a couple times, his is in clinical therapy. And so different, field of helping humans than you are, but still that helping humans. And I've got to say that dual degree seems so beautiful because you get such an in-depth understanding of like the Western side, right? The pharmacology of it, right? From like UW or something like that. But then you get this beautiful integration with Bastyr and the natural side, the holistic side, the
Yes.
herb side, the energy side, if
Yes.
you will. And just, finding the way that the human, because the human has to be very unique to want to desire to have that much education,
Yes.
that difference, and then figure out how it integrates within them
Yes.
to present that to the clients that they end up helping.
Yes, absolutely.
God, that's such a beautiful thing, man.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm really excited to like now I'm gonna start asking more questions like who's been to UW and Bastyr because
Yeah.
like I'm loving that combination of schooling.
Yeah, no, I have to let you know. My undergraduate was done at Long Island University,
Okay.
in New York, where I studied philosophy, psychology, and pre-medicine. And so the University of Washington sort of designation on my CV, my curriculum vitae on the website, really is about the postgraduate education I did there in understanding ENT, ear, nose, and throat medicine.
Okay.
Right. So, so I really appreciate that you honored me by saying, well, there's a need for evidence-based medicine. Sometimes things don't have evidence, and it's okay. Like when you hit a gong and there's a certain frequency, we can't really characterize that necessarily. We can understand the physics of the frequency, but what it does to a human being in all their states of being, body, mind, spirit, whatever it is. We can't, maybe we shouldn't characterize that, right?
Right.
But there's some things that we do need to, like, for example, the West Seattle Bridge here in Seattle has been under construction for some time.
Oh, yeah.
And I want that engineer to go to school and learn all the best practices about engineering. I don't want someone to come and say, I feel like maybe the bridge is working, and I'm kind of holding up my hands in a sort of meditative state, which I'm not mocking in any way.
Right.
Please, I hope that engineer also does that. But the first step is to make sure that bridge doesn't fall down, right? And so we honor that, but yet somehow when it comes to natural medicine circles, for some people, it becomes we guess and we see what works. And there's a whole science, there's a whole literature that we can also tap into that people have already invented the wheel, right? So like we can look at the botanical literature, we can look at all the things, and that's kind of my treatment is based on that.
Yeah, most definitely. And let's get towards your treatment. So you actually experienced a lot of respiratory issues growing up,
Yes.
as a young child.
Yeah.
So would that kind of like spur that passion to figure out like why is this happening? What's going on?
Yeah.
Is there something different than pharmacology that could help me out?
Yeah.
So what was that journey for you, and when did you start to like kind of get in front of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's always an origin story, right? So we have Marvel and we have DC Comics and there's superheroes out there, and hopefully Sinus Ninjas. To tell you the truth, first of all, I'm just going to tell you, since I'm on that, I'll tell you about the treatment. But also, I actually consider myself to be somewhat of a superhero, right?
Yeah.
And I think to that end, Sinus Ninjas kind of has an origin story like everybody else. There was a kryptonite, some kind of kryptonite, right? And so, yeah, you can relate to that.
Hell yeah.
And so my kryptonite was my respiratory system, absolutely growing up. And so I had terrible allergies to environment, to pet dander, to just about everything, dust mites. When I had the allergy test done at the allergist office, all the people in the office came to look at me because my back was just wheeling up, all the wheels that they
wow.
create,
Yeah.
from all the allergies. So I have what's called, or I had, not any longer, an atopic constitution. Atopic means allergic, right? So if you see a little kid and they're constantly rubbing their nose and itchy eyes and just constantly, no matter where they are and what time of year it is, that was me, right? So I had this atopic constitution, allergic. And so, that's kind of how it started. And just like any good parents would, they took me to the doctor, to the allergist, and I was on allergy shots, which is not such a bad idea. So not to give any kind of medical advice over the airwaves. Yeah. I'm not against, allergy shots if they're effective. But what I don't like doing is using a crutch when we don't need one.
Right.
And so like for me, it was all about understanding in my later years after I graduated from Bastyr University, understanding why I came to this medicine. It was asthma, it was sinusitis, it was terrible pressure in my cheek and forehead, sinuses, the maxillary and frontal sinuses. And so there was that, and there was the asthma, and I had dual diagnosis of bronchitis as well. And so my respiratory system was really kind of jacked,
Yeah.
And so I I think I came to this medicine through my respiratory system.
Yeah. You think it kind of like, in a way, it was drawing you there? You know, it was like,
Yeah.
this is, you know, I love ideas. I don't really, I try to stay away from beliefs, you know, but I love the idea of reincarnation and how we, in reincarnation, we set up our lives and we put in roadblocks and successes and things that we want to learn and all this shit. Right. And so, you know, when I start to get, you know, in my anxious states, in my depressive states, or in my bodily aching states, you know, whatever it is, asthma, I suffer from asthma also. I try to look at it now like there's a big there's a the energetic atom, right? That sat with a spiritual advisor and said, I want this to be the life that this human being experiences in a way, and I want these things to work, these things to happen. And so when I have those moments, it's like, okay, this was quote unquote, and this is your journey to find this word, gifted to me for a reason. And how am I going to find the way that this gift drives me? And the gift that you were given as far as respiratory issues as a child, which was probably debilitating at times, was probably really hard to deal with, has led you to this beautiful practice of finding ways to not only help yourself, but provide help for others now in similar situations, so that maybe kids that what you experience now, those kids don't have to experience.
Yeah, I thank you for that. Absolutely. And I treat people 12 and older, just because the treatment that I do, which I'll describe, in just a moment, it could be a little, let's say, weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so I say a little weird is good. In fact,
It's great.
I have the poster in my office. You've seen it. A little weird is good. And sometimes you have to be a little weird because the orthodoxy is weirder, if I can say, to offer these addictive nose sprays, for example.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's one of those paradigms that we got to figure out, is like, what might seem weird, if you really think about what you're currently doing and the effects that you're dealing with and quote unquote, like accepting as far as part of the treatment, why not try something different, right? Why not try something that seems a little esoteric, that seems
absolutely.
something, outside of what you normally would, because I think our body craves that stuff, right? And that information crosses our path for a reason, right? If you're ready to accept that as information that you want to play with, then that's great. If not, understand that it maybe is going to come back again. And if it crosses your path a second time, then it really is talking to you.
For sure. And
Yeah.
it's funny that you say that, because I have people who come to me and they say, I heard about you 7 years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, where were you 7 years ago? And he said, well, someone just recently said, you got to go see Sinus Ninja. And I was like, okay, that's kind of how marketing works. I mean, the dirty M word, really, but marketing is how we inspire people to access what they need, right? So, and they don't know what they need until you can tell them. And I think that's kind of interesting, the way that works, is that, I'll tell someone, go tell your friend about it. And then I won't see them, until another friend says, and another friend says, until eventually maybe they, I don't know, hear it from someone like their doctor even, because I get referrals from dentists quite often, because there's there's the trigeminal nerve is a sensory nerve, from the face, and the trigeminal nerve can become inflamed with sinuses and teeth stuff, right? So if it's we call dentogenic, then it's kind of like, that's the teeth, maybe a cavity has to be filled, right? But then if it's a sinus problem, then the dentist will send to me, and oftentimes I get resolution. So it wasn't the teeth, it was actually the sinuses, Wow. So that's kind of interesting, that not only do I get referrals from my current clients, and it's really easy to refer to me because you just type in Sinus Ninja on the web.
Yeah, you're going to find them quick.
Yeah, no one knows. I'm Frank Aversano, ND, right? So that stands for nice doctor, by the way.
Right, yeah.
Do you know what MD stands for? That's right. Mean doctor, right?
Yes.
I've got a lot of MD medical doctor friends who love that joke. Okay, so yeah, it also means nose doctor if you want. ND. It means naturopathic doctor. Okay, so so that's really so I get referrals from not just the people who come to see me, but then it's that 6 degrees of separation. I'll hear lots of people say, "Oh yeah, I heard about you a long time ago," but also heard about you from my dentist, my chiropractor.
Yeah.
my naturopath, who's a general practitioner. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was relating a lot to your story with that, because a lot of what I do with like, a lot of people know what Reiki is and energy work, you know, and it's kind of a buzz thing right now, so people are dipping a toe in. But sound baths are something that are a little more like, the people that know. Some people that don't know, they're like, I have no idea what that is, and very similar to like your treatment. It's like once you experience it, it's like, oh, that's what that does. Got it, right? But explaining it to somebody like a sound bath, I explain it to people all the time. People are like, "Do I wear a bathing suit?" And I'm like, "Okay, all right, let me dial it back." Yeah, I've got 100%. You know, it
There's
might
no
be a little
water
uncomfortable,
involved,
but you know. So, but it's one of those experiential things. You
Yeah.
know? So let's talk about your treatment, man, because it is an
Yeah.
experience, and it's a beautiful, like, it's a very it's very sense oriented.
Okay.
There's a lot of senses that happen in the nose, from the mask you put on to the actual treatment. So let's talk about it. Like, first walk through the treatment, and then we
Yeah.
can talk about how you found it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing someone experiences when they first come in is my explanation of the treatment. I think that's important because sometimes people go to doctors and doctors really operate upon them as opposed to work with them in team, like in a
Yeah.
team effort. So I'm really clear to say, here's all the steps when someone first comes in, and it's really not that menacing. It's a nebulizer mask for the first 5 minutes, and so they're sitting in a forward-leaning massage chair, and so the massage chair, they're kneeling and sitting. If you kind of get that idea of a office ergonomic chair, if you've ever had a massage in a massage chair, it's kind of like that. And the face is put through the face cradle, so they have access to the face. And then the mask is actually just placed in the face cradle, so they breathe in these vapors, and the vapors, all the contents of the vapors is on my informed consent. I'm very transparent with everything, even pricing. One of the things I'm just going to, as an aside,
Yeah.
doctors commonly don't put prices on their websites, and if I want to go to a doctor, I want to know how much that's going to be, like the first visit, second visit, and that's all I do. I do the first treatment, then follow-ups, and it's just, there it is. And so you can go to the website and find out what that is. So I love transparency, and so explaining to people the treatment before they actually do it is really important, especially with the younger ones, like,
Yeah.
12, 15, even 20-year-olds. There's a certain apprehension of the unknown, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Right. You sort of like came in and like, what's going to happen here? But hopefully I put you at ease, and my clients at ease by saying, so we're going to be in the nebulizer mask for 5 minutes, and that's vapors. It should smell pretty good. It does have a garlic isolate in it, which is called allicin, and it's antimicrobial. There's also a sugar alcohol called xylitol, which is going to help to reduce biofilm adhesion. Now, biofilms, huge buzzword in medicine right now. Okay, yeah. So there's gut biofilms. They're like plaque on your teeth, right? But they cause disease, and the natural bacteria in our bodies make it. It's like plaque on your teeth. The strep viridans, mutans, they'll make these, biofilm colonies, basically. And what the colonies, it's the really film over the colonies, and it's protective. Like, they want to protect themselves just like everybody else.
Right.
But we, of course, go in there with the devastating toothbrush, and we go in there with the devastating floss,
Right.
and we disrupt the biofilms. And that's the second part of the treatment. So after the nebulizer mask for 5 minutes, people will then go back into the face cradle, so I have access to their face. And then I place therapeutic swabs. Now, COVID kind of stole my jam ad.
I know, right? Yeah.
Everybody now knows about swabs. Before, it was like I was this kind of secret ninja in some room somewhere, like placing swabs in people's noses that wasn't related to diagnostic swabs, right? But then now COVID, of course, stole my diagnostic swab, kind of jam. And it's kind of funny. But we can laugh now, funny, not funny, the pandemic, but
Right, yeah.
it's right. But yeah, no. So I placed therapeutic swabs as opposed to diagnostic swabs. They're more comfortable, they're thinner, and so the placement, the swabs on the swabs have plant essences of red thyme, eucalyptus, lavender, and mint, peppermint. Okay, and it's very soothing. It smells great.
It does smell great.
The thing about these oils, I should tell you, essences, same idea, is that the bugs in your nose can't adapt to it fast enough. There are like hundreds of these, polyphenols, phenolics, botanical, sort of like, aromatics, basically. And the bacteria, viruses, even funguses can't adapt. Whereas if you use a drug like, an antibiotic, there's a single agent. And then that's why, the bacteria especially can then adapt.
Adapt to it, and then get stronger, and then resist it, and then totally, yeah. And it's so. There's two of those swabs that go in each nostril.
Correct. Yeah.
And it's such a, like, the oils, the way the oils, like the first treatment I had, I was so clogged up I could barely even breathe through my nose. But the sequential treatments that I had from you, I was we were able to kind of get some freedom there, and those oils going in, especially the time really stood out to me, and that was such a good, like, it just, I could feel everything starting to open up, the inflammation going down, but it was the amount that drained while I was sitting there. Because I sit there for what, like 7 to 10 minutes, I think it is. Yeah. And it's fascinating.
Yeah,
And
it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
So I just want to impress upon, my clients that it's not like a long treatment. It's 25 minutes really in length. The first visit we do, like a really 10, 15-minute discussion. And that's really good because when I go to my doctor at Kaiser, it's kind of like $175 just for the visit. There's no treatment involved, and so I really love my price points because it's a sweet one that people aren't too afraid to pay, and it keeps me going, right? So that's any business. We take in accounts receivable so that we can continue what we do.
Definitely.
I don't really have to make a Porsche payment. I have a really nice Toyota Tacoma 2012 that it's great. But so that's the other thing I like to tell people is that some med spa practices, it's all about raking in the cash, and I just want to mention that I have a nice teaching job. I'm also an anatomy teacher at Washington Spa Academy in Bellevue, and so they teach aesthetics and also massage there, reflexology, and so
nice.
Yeah.
Well, with when you do take the swabs out, I think that was one of the more intriguing parts of my part of that conversation was how much information you found from, like, say the stringiness between the swabs, like how much the mucus would stick from one to the other. And I think one of the things that really kind of like I wanted to flag was I think in one of the nostrils when you pulled out the swabs, you said there's bubbles, and you said that's a sign of seasonal allergies. And I was like, oh, interesting. I mean, that's not something I could see on my own, but just that knowledge of, seeing what that is and saying, oh, that is probably a seasonal allergy.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first, like, actual signs that I've gotten from a doctor saying, like, you do actually have seasonal allergies.
Yeah. So I did call them therapeutic swabs, but they're also diagnostic in a way because, first of all, I can palpate with the swabs. And so I don't recommend doing this at home, kids, but absolutely not. But when I place a swab, I'm able to then figure out if there's soft tissue derangement or if there's any kind of endpoint where like maybe the anatomy is different. So I call it my MacGyver X-ray machine, right? So basically my hands, after doing this for 22 years, I can understand basically what it feels like. So it is therapeutic, absolutely, but it's also diagnostic in that regard. The second piece of diagnosis, which you're mentioning, is the strings between the swabs really are kind of like cobwebs, and you can stripe across your teeth. And, it's kind of gross, but you can take your index finger and stripe across your upper teeth and then string out a biofilm. And it's really, really, and it's kind of looks like a cobweb, really. And that's what's causing cavities, right? So that's what's causing disease in the mouth. And so we have then in the nose and sinuses these biofilm colonies basically that want to protect themselves. And in so doing, they protect themselves against white blood cell invasion, for example, which is our natural defense. And they also protect themselves against antibiotics, for that matter. Right. I'm not beyond prescribing antibiotics. In the state of Washington, I certainly can do that, and a steroid as well. I haven't prescribed antibiotics or a steroid in probably 3 years. Okay. And I probably have only done so in the last 22 years a handful of times. But when I do that, put an antibiotic and a steroid on, it's temporary, but they're doing the treatments at the same time, busting through those biofilm colonies, which is different than what the samurai do as opposed to what the ninja does. Yeah. Right? The samurai is so orthodox in the fighting methods and everything, drugs and surgery, and they don't have anything else. I've got ninja throwing stars, and I've got guerrilla warfare tactics, which is really just the swabs, but people crazy, afraid of coming to Sinus Ninja. I'm not going to put, anyway. Yeah. Anyway, it's kind of my metaphor for the ninja. But and then so besides that, we're able to see the white blood cell evidence with bubbles. And so you mentioned the bubbles, and so not everybody has bubbles. And so when I see those bubbles, that's evidence of eosinophilia, which is eosinophils in the nose, and it's a mildly it's a mild correlation with it. If they tell me they have symptoms at certain times of the year, plus I see bubbles, then it's confirmatory.
Right. So was this a treatment that you learned at Bastyr, or was this something you kind of like along the lines of all the information you've been gathering in through the schooling that you had,
Yeah.
and finding that passion of respiratory?
Yeah.
And so was there, because I kind of remember you saying this was like an ancient style of practice of some sort, or maybe
Yeah.
the oils that you were using were something like that. But like, how did this all like manifest into this
Yeah.
practice that you got now?
Yeah, I just chuckle about it because we in medical procedures class had a naturopathic doctor who was a little eccentric, and he came in, and his name was Ian Nesbitt. If so, I don't know. Anyway, if he's out there, and so Dr. Nesbitt came in with these swabs, kind of unsterile swabs, had some essential oils. He said, "Here, go at it, and we're going to put swabs in each other's noses to reduce biofilm adhesion." And I thought this was, we all laughed at it, like, but he was requiring us to do this. It is an old naturopathic treatment. Osteopaths also have done this treatment. In fact, I just had someone come from Canada because their osteopath retired and they used to do this treatment. And now they're like, 80 something years old and they're traveling from Canada to get this treatment. Her son brings her, right? Wow. And so I know. The history of this treatment is long, and it's a modified naso-simpatico. So if anybody out there knows a naturopath who's doing naso-simpatico, this is an elevated form of that. And I say it's elevated because I now have MacGyver hands that I can train for somebody else. So I do hope in the future to have other ninja that I can train and then do the treatments around the country, because I get emails all the time, not just from Canada, but also from other states. And people actually do medical tourism, and they come with, they come and do treatments with me while they're here
cool.
visiting. Yeah. So that's one other piece of that, that's kind of interesting.
Medical tourism. I like that. I've never heard that term before.
Oh yeah, people do
love
with
that.
dentistry. They go to Mexico or places where the dentistry is a little less expensive.
Totally. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So was the treatment that you saw, were they using the nasal swabs in the similar to what you're doing now?
Yeah, right. Similar, but way
different.
primitive. Yeah. And so we were told that this was a treatment that sort of began with naturopathy in the 1850s when, Father Knipe, from Germany came with naturopathy to the States and opened up his first sanitarium. Sanatorium? Sanitarium is where you go for when you're mentally ill. Sanatorium, I should probably say. Okay, there you go. Where you go for health, restoration, kind of like a spa. And so, no one is doing it. And this is the little bit of sadness on my part. I have naturopaths from all over the Puget Sound who refer for it because they know about it, but they're the older naturopaths. The younger naturopaths, they're much more interested in IV therapies and really more heroic, kind of health measures, which are helpful, for a lot of people for thyroid, problems and that kind of stuff, but and general health, with IVs. But I'm the only one really that I know of in the world that has taken this and has elevated it to a point where I have data, which means that every time someone comes in, I have a scale that I use, a 4-point scale. And it's based on subjective, like, if someone tells me that they feel better, like you just did. Since you revealed that you came to see me, I can just say that. But it's one of those things where I may have all this data, and this is why I have an endorsement from one of Seattle's, if not the country's, top sinus surgeons, and that was just a recent, great thing that just recently happened. Yeah, and so if you go to my website, you'll be able to see who that is. And they came to my office and said, I'm interested in what you're doing here. For people who don't need sinus surgery, this is where I want to send them. And she teaches all over the country residents on how to do the sinus surgery. She's also a rhinologist. So she's a fellow of the American Rhinologic Society, so she's a nose doctor and a sinus surgeon, which is kind of rare.
Wow.
And she came to my little clinic to figure out what I was doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
It's exciting.
Does that does that happen a lot, or do you see that maybe starting to happen more in the future where professional doctors from different medical fields are starting to seek, that information that you've now been working with for 20 plus years and have that, it's like that whole 10,000 hours kind of idea. It makes a master, you do something enough and you move those cotton swabs around enough in people's nasal cavities, and you really, you start to feel the nuances of what's going on.
It is very subtle. It's not just, kind of placing swabs. I did experiment at the beginning
Yeah.
because I got taught it, and that was really all. But to answer that question, yeah, now that I have a rhinologist and a sinus surgeon who's well respected all over the country, really, I can sort of leverage that and use that to say this is not as hokey as it might, sound to, say a family practice doctor who's a medical MD, medical doctor, one of those mean doctors. I'm just joking. Or an osteopath who's generally osteopathic doctors these days in general are very medical oriented.
Yeah.
They're doing drugs and surgery just like MDs, and they sort of lost their tradition. Whereas naturopaths are still in that root of nature as healer, and that's where I live.
Yeah. And it's interesting just, I mean, being in I guess in a similar adjunct field, like esoteric field, with energy work that I do in the sound healing. I've been doing it not nearly as long as you, for about 4 years now with these modalities, but it's interesting to see the interest that's now being garnered into these areas. Whereas before, like you were saying, it was like hokey, woo woo, like we don't want to, whatever. Okay, go over there and do the thing. But now there's a lot of clout that's being put into some of this stuff, where whether it's instrumentation that we've now developed that we can see what sound, like for me, what sound does to the frequencies of the body, what specific frequencies do. John Hopkins is doing goddamn research now. I mean, there's all this different spotlights that are being shown on some of these seemingly esoteric practices that used to be kind of shunned, and now, kind of begrudgingly some of these folks are coming around. But it's, it's like, how, so I guess part of this is like, how do we hold the space while people that may have mockingly dismissed a modality are now like, what's actually going on there?
Sure. Questions are always good,
Yeah.
right? When people ask me questions. By the way, if you've never met Adam, I'm sitting in a room right now, and there's a beautiful gong. Now, I'm also a musician, so I studied a little bit of music in my college time. And would we call that a gong, or is that a tam-tam?
It's a planetary gong.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's tuned to so Paiste makes it's a German. I guess I knew them first for making cymbals.
Okay, right.
But they've gotten into planetary gongs and gongs in general over the past few decades.
Yeah.
And so this one is a Pluto gong, and it's tuned to a C sharp.
Right. Is it made by Paiste?
Yeah.
Because they're Swiss, right? Swiss company, I believe. And then, but they make their factories in Germany, but they also have factories in other parts of the world. Yeah.
I think this one came out of Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah, because I ordered it and it was here in 4 or 5 days. I'm like, there's no way it came from Europe in that long.
Super cool. Yeah, I actually played Paiste cymbals, and I still do, like at the casinos when I was playing drums. But that's a whole other life, and we're here to talk about my ninja life. But if you've never met Adam, I'm sitting in this room with these singing bowls, and I have this beautiful gong, and there's beautiful aromatherapy that I'm smelling. Of course, the sense of smell for me is really important. Really important. Yeah. So.
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned to me too, since we're talking about the whole nose, throat kind of area, is when I came to you, I was saying I was so clogged that I was blowing my nose one time, and water started coming out of my eye, and I was like, oh my God, I broke something. And I didn't realize how connected all of this was.
Yes.
And I think I'd actually just finished doing a neti pot, and it was a really clogged area that I was trying to neti pot out, which, this is bringing that up, was another thing that you kind of brought up that, so when I went into Dr. Frank, I was, honest as, always honest, as we need to be with our doctors. And so I was like, but I was excited because I thought I was doing good shit. Right. I was like, hey man, I'm neti potting twice a day. I got the nose sprays, I got this. And I just kept seeing you go okay.
I'm a good listener until
you are a very good listener
until I become a really good talker.
And this is just the information that we might think we're doing right by ourselves, but we're doing some damage. So with the neti pot, can you explain kind of where we might be going wrong with that?
Yeah, this is a really, really good sort of topic, because when we think about natural medicine, naturopathic medicine, or kind of, hygienic, practices, we think that if a little is good, a whole lot must be better.
Right.
And so we find out from the medical literature that using saline inside the nose under high positive pressure, which, neti pots are kind of it's a gravity device. But that has led now to something like Neomed, which is actually a high positive pressure, kind of like like a bottle, like a squeeze bottle, right? And then some people use even high positive pressure, like the Navage device, Navage. Now, I tell people 6 out of 10 people will do worse. 60% of people do worse with neti pot use. That's chronic. I mean, like everyday use, 4 or 5 times a week use. If you're one of those 4 out of 10 people, the 40% that it works for, say, keep going. So I'm not gonna, knock it.
Right.
But think about in India, the Panchkarma was done twice a year, right? So like turn of the season, like maybe 2 to 4 times a year. It wasn't meant to be used. This is the Jala neti, by the way, the water placement inside the nose. That is the Jala neti. And then the Sutra neti is when they would put twine inside the nose.
Oh, and then floss.
And floss.
I've seen that.
This is how I got inspired to say, they must be disrupting biofilms.
Oh, interesting. Okay, all right.
Yogis don't get sinusitis, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And India's quite polluted in modern times, too, so we can say.
Yeah. I remember the first time, I think I was watching like a video on yogi aesthetics, or aesthetics, not aesthetics. And it was a lot of the like the hollow like belly breathing that they'll do, and like almost like suck their entire belly into their ribs, and you can see like, and so there was a little bit of that.
Yes.
There was like the esophagus flushing, where they would just drink a bunch of water and then throw it up and then drink a bunch of water, kind of combo style, but without the medicine. And then, but then it was that nose flossing, and that was the thing that I got up and I was like, "What the fuck is going on right now?"
Totally, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, that's. I have people who come and they say they've seen that, and I tell them, yeah, this is very inspired by that, because the principle is the same. Whether or not they talk about biofilms or not, they're doing what naturally occurs to them to really disrupt whatever's in the nose. And I really find that by the way, I really find that neti pots also possibly destroy normal flora inside the nose.
What's that?
Right, the normal flora. Right.
Okay.
So naturally destroy the normal flora inside the nose, meaning like if we're constantly flushing the nose with saline, then we're also probably disrupting the microbiome inside the nose.
Right.
And so my treatment, I theorize my treatment brings the normal flora, the natural microbiome, further down into the antrum or the opening of the nose. So there's a almost like a let's say what's the word for it? I don't even know. Like it preserves and respects the microbiome.
Okay. Instead of like an antibiotic, which just like clear cuts all that shit out. Right.
So that's beyond like instilling flushes, nasal flushes all the time.
Right.
Using that is like the nuclear option.
Yeah. It's so interesting how much we're finding out about the microbiome from the gut, from our gut health, and but just how much that impacts our bodies, and how for so long we've just been just clearing all that bacteria out. You know, and just like, bacteria is bad, get it out. Like, clear it all out. And then we're wondering why pneumonia pops up, because it's like that's that one weed that pops back up. It's like, is everything cool? Can we come back out yet? All right, we're gonna fuck some shit up. You know,
you're on it. Are you sure you're not a doctor?
I just blame it on TV.
Well, you're naturally curious, and so you study a lot. I can tell.
But but that's one of those things that I found. We talked about synchronicities right before we hit record.
Yeah.
And information comes across our path for a reason.
Yeah.
And it's in where I'm at in life right now. I'm in a very explorative part of life where I'm opening myself up to places I once shut myself down to. And so maybe a lot of times, like, I'll read a book that I'm like, fuck, that book came across my path for a reason. I'll read it and I'm like, no idea why. Got seemingly nothing out of it, but like years later, that a passage will come back to me. So there's this reason, I think, that all of this hodgepodge kind of moves together in this way to give us the tools that we need to present whatever we need to present, right? So work with the humans that we're working with, work with the animals, work with the energies, whatever it is we do in life, right? But I think when we can start to find those nuances, like, that's, if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't be here now, right? With the modalities that you practice. Like, there was some spark that was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, what's so interesting is that I had to give up 99.9% of my education to do what I do.
Interesting.
Right? To become a physician, I had to study gastroenterology and cardiology and dermatology and all the ologies.
Yeah.
And then I settled on rhinology.
Yeah.
Settled on the little piece of real estate between, under my eyes, between my eyes here. And so my colleagues were like, why did you do that? You can do anything you wanted, but I don't want to do anything. I want to go deep,
Yeah.
right? Instead of wide. And so I think that a lot of times my colleagues, especially family practice naturopaths, family practice any doctor, really fancies themselves an expert on everything. And I decided that I wanted to go super, super deep and become the expert, the ninja, if you will, of the nose and sinuses.
Love that. And actually, I don't think we ever really dove into why you call yourself the Sinus Ninja yet. We've kind of tap danced around, we've played with the moniker, but like, what brought you to that actual name for yourself?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I love talking about this one too because so, really basically the samurai in feudal Japan were the ordered orthodoxy in terms of battle and fighting, right? So there was a certain way to do things. And they all fought the same way, meaning like the sword play was very prescribed. And that's a good word, prescribed, because now we have drugs and surgery that are prescribed. And so the analogy there is that the medical doctors are the orthodoxy, and they have certain prescribed things that it's the way it's done. Here's the hegemony, kind of like this is the way it's done. And I had to figure out, well, you know what? I don't want to be on steroids my whole life. In fact, they're dangerous, right? Brittle bones and all the rest of that. And so, in fact, they're not meant to be used any more than 21 days, right? So, like, that's kind of what people don't understand. Also, Afrin, right? And nasal sprays like this.
Right.
This podcast is not brought to you by Afrin.
Yeah.
Just want to say that. It's the, yeah. So anyway, and so I had to say to myself, what is the... What is the opposite of ordered fighting? Well, I looked at the British redcoats too. Like the reason why America exists is the United States exists, I should say, is because the British were ordered in lines. Like they were very regimented, and they had the redcoats, and they were super bright and super visible. What did the Americans do? The soon-to-be Americans, what they did was they hid and they picked them off, right? So they were acting in a guerrilla warfare kind of way. So the whole metaphor here is that Sinus Ninja is a metaphor. I am a ninja in contrast to the orthodoxy.
I love that. Very cool. And there's, so much thought that was put into that. You're pulling in different cultures, redcoats, ninjas, like the ideology of all that.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about wanting to expand and move across country. And so is that a current like working plan that you're working through right now? Is that an idea that you're still kind of fleshing out, seeing how it would work?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I get asked by my colleagues then, so how safe is this treatment?
Right.
It's as safe as more than 10,000 noses, right? Like, so I've done this a lot over the last 22 years. And I use the number 10,000. I haven't, counted really. My understanding when I studied Chinese medicine at Bastyr is, in ancient China, there was this idea of like one too many and then 10,000 like is the infinite number, right? So they didn't really have this kind of counting, like it's a very literary kind of thing. Of course, they had a number system, but 10,000 is infinite, right?
Yeah.
So, and then you mentioned 10,000 hours, and that's where that comes from, right? So you have your flight time that you have to kind of go through. And so first of all, I had to figure out, was it safe? And I have, I'm humbled to say and happy to say that, on the informed consent, there's all the things that could happen, but they've never happened.
Oh, cool.
Like a sustained nosebleed. If someone has high blood pressure, I'm going to ask them about that and be super gingerly careful about the swab placement. If someone has current blood pressure concerns, but usually people are coming in they're controlled, right? So the blood pressure is 130 over 90 or less,
right.
And so that's fine. And then if they do have a nosebleed, it's probably because they have a scab in their nose that probably should be removed anyway. And then I send them home with instructions to use an emollient inside the nose, which is vitamin E and shea butter, right? Okay, so there's that. When someone tests a drug or a surgical procedure, the first thing they have to figure out is it's safe. So then after safety is figured out, then they move on to the trials and see if it works, right? So is it effective? And so after realizing that it was safe, after about 50 people, the first person that came back for a second treatment, I was like, I'm on to something here, right? Because it's so super weird for a lot of people. So the first person that came back, I was like, I'm on to something.
Yeah.
They came back without me prodding them or coaxing them to come back, and so because it worked, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's effective. And so now I can tell you after, whatever number of people that I've treated that it's not only safe, but it's also effective. once I've established that, now I have all the data. And so not only is it now effective, but I have now, an N of, thousands of treatments,
Yeah.
meaning the N meaning like the statistical kind of like buzzword for like, you've done this a heck of a lot,
Yeah.
And so now I have all this data, which is why Amy, I said her first name, Amy, Dr. Amy, who is my colleague, the sinus surgeon rhinologist, said, you know what, you put me on the website, and if you go to the surgery section on my website, you'll see this person. And that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So in terms of like expansion, like we're talking about, I needed to get, now, I don't want to ever say I needed the buy-in of the medical world, because we are part of the medical world as naturopathic physicians. We're licensed, held to the same standards as medical doctors in the states that we're licensed. And so Washington, Oregon, Alaska is the closest states to here, Montana. And so as primary care doctors, we're held to those standards. And so now I've met those standards. I have the data,
Yeah.
and I have the safety, and I have the efficacy. So the next move is clinic number 2.
Hell yeah.
Right. And I don't know where that's going to be at the moment, but I do know that people around the country are asking me for it. Like I just got an email from the Southwest. Someone says that there's some kind of, growth, kind of like plant there that's driving them crazy, whatever it is. So in the future, what I will be doing is actually doing an analysis of all the allergies around the country and then kind of tying that in. But the treatment doesn't change, really.
Yeah.
It's just biofilm, right? As if
Yeah,
that's
right.
just right. It's just, biofilm reduction, which is a simple idea. And I think I have a good ninja handle on that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it just the idea, just as soon as you said the treatment would stay the same, I didn't realize until you said that treatment works no matter what allergy you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so beautiful, because I mean, some of the allergy tests that people have, like you were talking about earlier, all the stuff on your back and how irritating that is, to have a treatment that's going to work, and provide relief and provide, some openness in the nasal area, no matter what you got going on,
Right.
I think is very adaptable.
I hear you, and medicine calls us panacea. A panacea, right, is something that works for a lot of different conditions. Like, for example, nutrition, good nutrition is a panacea of a kind. Now, I'm also someone who's very much, and I'm advocating this, I don't want to go off topic, but I'm very interested in reducing inflammation in the body in general. You know the game Operation?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So what is the thing that's happening there? Is it really the writer's cramp, or is it really, the Charlie horse, or whatever's happening there? Or is it really the nose that's lighting up, right? And so that's the metaphor that I like to use as well, right?
I like that.
That inflammation appears in the nose and in the epithelium of the gut. And so for me, one of the next steps I will be doing, in addition to focusing all my effort on training someone to be as good as I am in the second clinic, and then the third and fourth and 10th or whatever's going to happen. Sinus Ninja on sides of buses everywhere, right? In cities around the country. But I really want to take a look at global inflammation and have a program that is partially going to involve intermittent fasting, for example.
Right.
I myself lost 32 pounds.
Wow.
In the last 18 months.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that. And it's not even for the cosmetic or the vanity, factor. It's really because I'm a naturopathic doctor who is getting to be 200 pounds and I'm 5'8", so that my own doctor at Kaiser said, no, we can't have this. And he gave me the information on intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And I thought that was something crazy I learned in my naturopathic school about fasting, starving yourself. Why would I want to do that? We have to eat 3 squares and snack 5 times a day,
Totally.
right? And no, not for me. And then so not anymore. And even right now, I haven't eaten all day today, and my mind is sharp because the ketones are feeding my brain, and here we are doing the thing. And
Yep.
So anyway, so that's a whole off-topic subject, but we can talk about it another time. But yeah,
love
really
it.
love it, right?
Yeah.
Really, really loving inflammation in general reduction, biofilm reduction. I think that is the curative for sinus problems.
There's I'll tap dance into your off-topic topic for a moment because I love that and I love tangents.
Yeah.
But I'm actually reading a book right now called Why We Sleep. Fascinating book, fucking fascinating book.
Totally.
Can't remember the author right off the top of my head, but they just finished a chapter about sleeping and inflammation and how if you're getting, between 6 to 8 hours, we want to go to the 8 hours, but if you're going below 6, you're really doing a lot of damage to your body.
Yeah.
And one of those damage points is the repairing of inflammation that you get in your body throughout the day. And if we're not getting that deep NREM sleep, which is usually the last 2 hours of the 8-hour cycle of sleep that they talk about, then inflammation just goes crazy.
Yeah.
And we now know that inflammation is one of those big keys of disease, right?
Oh, yeah.
The body, just like if you have a bad knee, then all of a sudden, like whatever, things going on in your body might land in your knee, and then all of a sudden you have arthritis or you have, something that happens down there. But if we can stay in front of that stuff, stay in front of the inflammation, which I love that that's just like leading to something like on a broader scale.
Yes.
The inflammation from the nose and the nasal cavities, and like, okay, now how does this link up to more inflammation that we can start to look at in the body?
Your insight is really refreshing to hear, and so you have it. Like you said, exactly what I would say, what I think any enlightened physician would say. And what also is very fascinating is, people might accuse me of not being a holistic doctor, like if I'm focused on this piece of real estate on the face, right? And this is not at all true, because again, when people come to see me, I will give them little bits and pieces along the way of how they can reduce inflammation. Maybe for someone it is intermittent fasting, or just skip breakfast this week, that kind of little simple. And that's kind of what I love, because people come to see me for 25 minutes. That's a long time, right? So 5 minutes in the nebulizer, it's 10 minutes with the swabs placed, and then I get to then in between that give them a little earworm about, like, why don't you try this or try that? I just did that for somebody recently who has high blood pressure. Really thin guy, we call these the sick, skinny people, where like probably has some organ fat somewhere that like he doesn't know about, maybe liver, whatever it is. And I told him, and he can't get enough research now about intermittent fasting and how he's doing it. He has a little belly, but he's skinny though. Like it's kind of a strange thing. And when we see that belly fat, we know that there's inflammatory process going on.
It's so great that you can, even though you're specializing in the nasal area, that you're able to still tap into that vast amount of knowledge that you've gained, through the multiple schools that you've been to. It's to say, okay, so you're here for this, but what I'm also hearing is, it's more like that yes and, right? Yes and, why don't we maybe talk about this a little bit?
Exactly. Exactly.
Fantastic.
Oh, it's so fun being a ninja, I'll tell you what.
I can see it, man. I can see it.
I mean, it takes one to know one. Because, I can tell that you're a ninja also.
The samurai bun up here.
Yep. I'm noticing that. Also, all the, sort of, dare I say, you said use the word esoteric, which is interesting. And, if it works and solves the problem, then there you are.
Exactly. And that's, I think, the thing that the underlying desire that I had to talk to you was that I also work in that area of, like we talked about, that people like, I don't even know if that's a thing, and then you do it and you experience it and it's like, oh my God, that's a thing. Yeah. And I don't need the validation, like you said, but it's nice to get it. It's nice to see. And I think it's more so, it's not really the validation. I think it's more so for me to see people put aside their own ego and embrace the actual feeling they just experienced, and not try to explain it away, not try to rationalize it away, and just know that, hey, this guy put 4 cotton swabs up my nose and I feel better. And I don't know why, but I do, right? Yeah. And that's like, I put a bull on your chest. I'm going to bang that bull until that energy gets back to where it needs to be. And if you take a deep breath and feel better, awesome. We don't have to know why. We just know that it works.
Love it.
Hell yeah.
That's, this is the kindred spirits that you find in the world, right? And I'm enamored by this room that I'm sitting in right now. It just feels so peaceful. And I don't think I've been more at peace all week, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this time. I really appreciate, you follow me down this rabbit hole, agreeing for a stranger that had one session to come on my podcast and talk about, the beautiful work that you do. And thank you for what you do for humanity. I love seeing people embrace the oddities maybe in life that may not make sense to anybody else, but do to you, and you find your way to present that. And so thanks for what you do, man.
Likewise. Thank you, Adam.
Look forward to having you back.
Okay. You got it.
Thank you so much for spending time with the Sinus Ninja and myself. Please check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Dr. Frank to learn more about his treatment that he offers or to book a session with him. And always obeisance and love. See y'all next time.